I've tested 4 of the latest and greatest XC race bikes on the market, and by the end of this video, you'll know which I think is the best. Before I can reveal my thoughts on the bikes, first you need to know what they are, what their features are, and how I tested them. They're all updated models for 2024. The Cannondale Scalpel, the specialised Epic 8, Mondraker's F-Podium, and the beautiful Yeti ASR. While each bike has models costing 5 figures, I picked their second or third tier models. So while they're far from cheap, they're the bikes I reckon you'll likely see at national level XC races, powered by the legs of the rank and file privateer racer. Let's look at each of the bike's key features. The Cannondale Scalpel 1 Lefty has 120mm of travel at each end. At the back, the chainstays have a noticeably flattened area, mimicking the location and functionality of a pivot in the rear triangle. At the front, there's a distinctive Lefty Ocho carbon fork with its single leg design. Its stanchion rolls through needle and roller bearings for a uniquely smooth feel, which I'll tell you more about later on. The Mondraker F-Podium RR is the only bike here without a flex stay single pivot linkage. Instead, their zero suspension system is a twin link design. This means front and rear triangles are joined by a pair of short links. There's 110mm of travel at the rear and 120 at the front. The 120mm travel specialised Epic 8's USP isn't its hypermodern shape, but it is the magic middle. This digressive tune in both the fork and the shock, with dampers custom created for the Epic 8 by Rockshox, sets it apart from any other bike on the market. What does it mean? I'll tell you more about that when I delve into the bike's performance. Rounding out the test is the 115mm travel Yeti ASR T3. They've thrown it back to 2003 when they first used flex stays, so if you're surprised to see a flex stay design rather than their ubiquitous Switch Infinity link, don't be. Now, I promise very shortly I'll tell you how good or not the bikes are, but it's important to give you some testing credentials. I tested the bikes back to back to back to back. They and I endured long loops in the countryside, fast laps in the woods on tracks I've raced as part of the Welsh National XC Series, and to reflect the ever more technical nature of XC racing, I even rallied them down Bike Park Wales's red and black graded trails. Yes, I did get some punctures. It's been 10 years since we last saw an ASR, and in that time, a lot has changed, not least the jump to longer travel in XC race bikes. The 115mm at the rear is controlled by a flex stay arrangement. Excess carbon has been removed from the layup, pivots located to reduce material requirements, and there's size-specific frame stiffnesses. The geometry is moderate rather than radical, with a 66.5° head angle across the 5 sizes, a 76.5° seat angle, and a reach of 465mm in a size large. Let's quickly check on the specs. This second tier T3 build comes with ultimate suspension from Rockshox with a 3-position twist lock on the bars. There's a SRAM XO transmission, alloy DT Swiss hoops, and a fast Recon and Recon race tyre combo. There's always a special feeling when you first jump on a Yeti, and the ASR is no different. It's a touch shorter than the other bikes, and that plays into its hands in tight, twisty trails. It's super reactive through the trees, while the narrower 740mm bars give it a bit more breathing space too. At the front, the SID is a fantastic fork, combining with the Recon rubber to provide a supple, traction-rich ride quality. On more technical tracks, the front end doesn't shy away from the action. Further back, when you really open the throttle, the ASR doesn't feel quite so composed. The shock has a 40mm stroke rather than the 45mm found elsewhere. Higher pressures are required, and I found the shock needed a little more care to get it set up perfectly. The skinny stays and svelte build don't give the same sure-footed confidence of the sturdier feeling bikes, exacerbated by the pingier feeling suspension that didn't recover quite so well between big hits. However, on smooth, fast terrain, its ability to generate speed is exhilarating, and on day-long epics across the hills, I'd pull this from the garage in an instant. It has a lovely, springy feeling as you carve from corner to corner, really maximising the Maxxis rubber's cornering performance. The 3 positions of the suspension are all useful, though it was the middle position that became my default on the ups. Lock the bike out and haul on the bars, and the tyres still have that little bit of bite, but off-road, that middle position gives you plenty of suspension stability along with the comfort and grip that's required. For 2024, Mondraker has merged the purebred F-Podium with the downcountry version, the F-Podium DC, into a single do-it-all 110mm package. The bikes see longer front ends paired with short stems, blending high-speed stability with agility via their forward geometry philosophy. The F-Podium RR in a large has a moderately slack 66.5 degree head angle, a steepish at my saddle height 77.5 degree seat angle, long 480mm reach and moderately short 435mm chainstays. Spec-wise, there's a 120mm Fox 34 step cast matched by a Fox float shock at the rear, both being factory level units with a 3-position on-bar lockout. There's a mechanical SRAM drivetrain and carbon Mavic wheels. The lack of sag markings on non-Rockshox shocks and the struts either side of the shock make measuring sag accurately tricky, and the Fox lockout lever requires an overbar dropper lever, which took a little fine tuning to get positioned well. Mondraker's zero suspension system often has a very active feeling about it, and so while traction levels are high on climbs, so is the chance of pedal bob, especially at the 28% sag, which I found worked best overall on the F-Podium. As such, the lockout lever was frequently used to toggle the shock into medium or firm positions on the climbs, turning the bike into a rocket ship. The chassis feels stout, so under power the bike feels reactive and ready to accelerate at a moment's notice. On super smooth flow trails, I occasionally use the medium mode to get the bike pumping through rollers even faster, thanks to the additional support the damper gave. As you'd expect from a Mondraker, the shape is sorted. The faster and more technical the tracks get, the better the shape feels, with the F-Podium excelling in the steepest terrain and giving confidence when faced with bigger features. With the front wheel well in advance of the cranks and with the supportive fork doing its thing, it feels impossible to eject over the front. Further back, the shorter stays ensure that the bike twists and turns on a dime, while the low BB helps it carve through corners. The well-damped fork and shock and the progressive nature of the suspension keep the bike composed and stable during big hits. However, they soak up chatter less effectively than lighter damped units, leading to a choppier ride over rock girders and matted routes. As ever, there's a compromise to be made between pedal efficiency and stability and traction and smoothness. With the F-Podium, I was most likely to be altering shock presses on a course-by-course basis. The Scalpel name has a long history in the XC game, and that's set to continue through this iteration. The shape of the new bike is as modern as they come, with a 66.6 degree head angle, 77.5 degree seat angle and a reach of 475 in a large. The kink seat tube allows for long droppers, while the 1.5-inch headset top bearing is said to be big enough for brake levers to pass through, meaning reduced maintenance woes in the future, though you can't fit the levers through the handlebars hole. The Lefty Ocho is the clear talking point here. Its single leg design might not seem like it, but it's stiff and the action is smooth. A quick release lever on the brake caliper mount is there to make the wheel removal easier, though the caliper flaps around frustratingly. US viewers won't get this exact bike, but one with a similar build kit with Fox suspension instead. There's only 2 suspension modes, open and lock. Fortunately, Cannondale has managed to ensure that in open mode the Scalpel climbs without too much pedal bob, so you can save the lock mode for smoother climbs or sprints. The Aspen rear tyre rolls ridiculously fast, and stiffness from the chassis and the wheels means the Scalpel is fast in a sprint. Despite this, given the suspension is often in open and there's a nice fore-aft balance thanks to the longer rear chainstays, there's more grip on offer than you'd think from the skinny treads. On the way back down, the Scalpel impresses. The long front end and slack head angle give plenty of high-speed confidence, while the Recon Race tyre is a better cornerer than you might give it credit for. The Lefty is a good fork. It has a slightly different feel to a normal telescopic fork thanks to the needle and roller bearing internals, but it's supple and smooth, and both the damper and air spring do a good job of dealing with hits big and small. If anything, I'd say the internal structure enables the Lefty to work exceptionally well on flat landings. The fork binds less than a SID or a 34 step cast, leading to a smoother feel. The bike's fun to ride and loves being picked up and played around on. It corners well and doesn't shirk its responsibilities in bigger terrain. The stable early stroke of the suspension means it zooms through flowier trails, while there's really smooth progression towards the end, ensuring that your ankles don't suffer on bottom outs. Oh, and this is probably the only integrated bar and stem system that I've ever kinda liked. Read into that what you will. I've a limited word count here, so let's cut to the chase. Specialized has the geometry right, and their choice of spec leaves little to be desired. They fit some of my favourite XC wheels, and the drivetrain and brakes are great. Some people might want a longer dropper post. Right, now that's out of the way, let's talk Magic Middle. This is a collab between Specialized and Rockshox with the custom internals for their SID fork and SID Lux shock. It's a digressive low-speed compression damping tune, which in effect makes the early part of the suspension travel relatively firm before the suspension feels more open deeper into its travel. It does this via speed-sensitive valving. Slow shaft speeds, such as pedal bob, are tuned out by the damping, but when a larger impact is felt, such as a drop, the resultant faster shaft speed enables more oil flow, opening the damping up. It's not quite that simple, but that's basically how it works. The goal is to have a system that resists pedal bob, but effectively and effortlessly soaks up bumps from the ground up. It's kind of closed, but kind of open all at the same time. The engineers say you should be able to spend around 80% of your time in the magic middle mode, rather than constantly flicking between modes. It's a subtle difference from your usual suspension tunes and modes, but one which I reckon makes a noticeable difference to the bike's performance. Yes, the Epic descends slightly better in its open mode. Likewise, in the lock mode, the suspension is solid, but the majority of the time you don't need to think about changing your suspension settings. Elsewhere, the shape of the bike is bob-on, blending manoeuvrability with a steadfast nature that means the bike begs to be let off the brakes and hauled down the trails. It feels super composed in the most technical trails, with a planted feeling that was the most confident on Bike Park Wales' black rated test tracks. Being critical, I prefer the Maxxis tyres elsewhere. The specialised rubber is too rounded for my taste, so the bike tips more when turns are initiated, which can feel a little unnerving, and there's not quite as good grip on off-camber tracks. Obviously, I've only touched the surface of all these bikes, but none of them will leave you embarrassed on the racetrack. They're all incredibly fast machines capable of tackling XC courses the world over. The Yeti is a joy to ride, fast, agile, smooth and fun, but a little overawed in the most demanding of terrain. The Mondraker has a great shape, but I think I'd have preferred it with Rockshox's slightly more supple suspension. The Scalpel is brilliant. There's very little to complain about here, and the Lefty is, in my opinion, a stellar XC4. But it's a specialised sorted chassis high-spec package with its unique magic middle suspension setting that steals the show for me. For full reviews of all the bikes, of course, you should head to BikeRadar.com. But if you want more XC content, then watch this video.